So we are now in that final stretch towards the playoffs, the 2025 OHL Trade Deadline now in the books. And what was interesting is before the OHL Trade Deadline, I was invited to talk on the OHL podcast with Mike Farwell. And with the way the schedule works, with Kitchener being here tomorrow, I figured let's return the favor and have Mike Farwell join us today after the trade deadline, which kind of ended on a quiet note, but still, what was your take with the deadline this year?
Mike, my main take overall is that I'm a little jealous of your side of the league, if I can put it that way. The Eastern Conference, here's the thing, and I know I'm stating the obvious, but there can be only one winner. But from this deadline, clearly a minimum of six teams, I think, at least five, think they have a legitimate shot at this, right? So if we go back to the beginning of the season and take predictions for what they're worth, I get it. But coming into the season in the East, everybody was talking about Oshawa. Everybody was talking about Brampton. I was personally talking about Brantford, a team that I thought had a bit of an early arrival last year, above expectations. So coming into this season as a contender. And then the team that you cover so closely, people said to me, don't overlook the Barrie Colts. There's something cooking up there. And so those four teams were definitely in the mix from the get-go. And I would argue, as the trade deadline and midseason approached, probably still. Brantford hasn't necessarily found its footing the way you might have expected after last season. A variety of reasons for that, not the least of which would be injuries, etc. However, you keep those four teams in the mix, and then you get to the trade deadline, and all of a sudden the Kingston Frontenacs clearly think they have a chance, and the Sudbury Wolves clearly think they have a chance. And oh yeah, by the way, has anybody noticed the Niagara Ice Dogs, who are incredibly quiet by Ice Dogs standards, right? We're only a few years removed from the 27 trade season in St. Catharines, and the Ice Dogs have very quietly been going about their business this year and are still, I would say, by not moving Owen Flores, suggesting that they are still very much in the mix in that Eastern Conference. So take your pick. Again, there can only be one winner, but Sudbury and Kingston certainly wanting to be in the conversation with the likes of the Barrie Colts, the Brampton Steelheads, the Oshawa Generals, and more.
Well, it's certainly shaping up to be a grind in the East, but then when you look at the West, well, the London Knights already a strong team already. They pick up Cam Allen, and outside of that, it seemed as though the team's willing to take that wait and see approach. Nothing really from the Kitchener Rangers, nothing really from Windsor. Flint, they picked up McHugh. We're still waiting to find out the details of that move, but really, the Western Conference, surprisingly quiet.
Yeah, and I can't help but think, Mike, the reason for that is because London is so good. And look, you don't want to just roll over. There's a reason you play the games, right? And I think there is still an untested nature to the two goaltenders that the London Knights have, but you can't argue with the numbers. I mean, Austin Elliott just establishing a mark that we haven't seen in 40 plus years in the Ontario Hockey League by winning his first 16 starts. Now, we also can look at his history in the WHL,
Mhm.
where his playoff performance hasn't exactly been stellar. And then all you have behind him is an unproven, much younger Medvedev. But still, nobody is squawking with what London has put together. And we have seen, goaltenders that we might have been considered less than an A plus. They might have been an A minus or even a B plus goaltender that can win championships with teams that are well built in front of them. And there's no question that the London Knights are that. I like what the Windsor Spitfires did. They addressed a need in Wyatt Kennedy for sure. The Flint Firebirds, your point is very well taken with Sam McHugh. We're not exactly sure how that's going to pan out. For the team's sake, I mean, you give away one of your top young players and a bunch
Mhm.
of draft picks to get them, but Flint obviously not ready to throw in the towel. I still don't know that they have the kind of team that you'll need to beat the London Knights this year. And then, yes, the Kitchener Rangers, which quietly, I think Christian Humphreys, the addition for free coming from
Mhm.
the University of Michigan. I'm not sure there's a team in the league, Mike, that has benefited from the NCAA rule change more than the Kitchener Rangers have. And they've got, not just for my money, my bias notwithstanding, the best goaltender in the league in Jackson Parsons right now. And you know that a goaltender on his own can steal you not just a game, but a round in the playoffs. And I think the Kitchener Rangers, by not getting too aggressive, preserve their future and their present certainly looks awfully good. So it's no question that the London Knights are still the front runners in the West and probably in the league, but teams, shoring up with, again, Windsor addressing the need on the blue line, et cetera. The Rangers getting that quote unquote free acquisition, Flint making the deal for an OA like McHugh. They're not going away quietly.
And you mentioned Humphrey with the NCAA commitment. It seems as though this year, with so many unknowns since that vote, we just don't know how things are all going to play out from here with NCAA commitments, players coming up from other leagues. How much of a factor do you feel that may have been with this trade deadline? Because it felt like we had all these rumors talking about big names moving, but at the time, not many of them moving when you think of the likes of Luchenko, Musty, Pinelli, those staying still. So did the NCAA ruling have a factor here this year?
I'm not sure that ruling had a factor on the trade deadline. With Luchenko, I was just in Guelph the week before this deadline, and all the talk there was Jet Luchenko's not going anywhere. And it's funny, obviously he didn't, but Thomas Budnick did. So George Burnett wasn't quite done dealing. But I think the big piece when it comes to Luchenko specifically is he's likely coming back for another year, despite the fact he hung around the Philadelphia Flyers, where he's drafted to for a little bit this season. The general consensus is that Luchenko's coming back. So let's have a star player, help him mentor these younger players because clearly there's a youth movement in Guelph and see what we can get for the rest of the way. And then Luchenko would be a piece that gets moved next year. Musty obviously stays put because the Sudbury Wolves have decided they're very much in the mix in the East, etc. So I'm not certain how much the ruling played a part in this trade deadline. I'll just add this to the rumors that are always out there. I don't know if it's just me getting older and crankier, Mike, or if the rumors were louder than in the past, but I would really like to see the online trade breaking dialed back a little bit
Mm.
by these anonymous accounts that claim to be insiders with some sort of knowledge that guys like you and I who cover teams don't have. So many names get thrown around out there. I wonder if half of them are ever actually in the mix or in trade talks.
And that's a great point because a lot of these players in this league, they're kids, they're teenagers, they're in high school, and they're seeing the posts on social media. So it's, you got to expect that if they're seeing their names and trade rumors and whatnot, that's kind of got to throw them off just a bit, especially when they're at this age.
Yeah, I think that is exactly the point here. And I'm always reluctant to say, yeah, but they're kids that use that argument because the other side then you have to also acknowledge like when they achieve great success and we, throw flowers at them and treat them like professionals, like you can't really have it both ways, right?
Mhm.
But I think that's the key point here. And I know for a fact, in fact, because he told us that the head coach of the Kitchener Rangers, UC Ahokas, went to his players, and these were primarily the overagers, Trent Swick and Adrian Misseljevic, whose names had been bandied about in trade rumors, and said, you're not going to be moved because clearly it is a distraction. And look, I'll also make the argument that being involved in trade rumors and being involved in trades is also something these young men are going to deal with later in their careers if they reach the professional ranks. So we could argue that we're training them for that. But not every player in this league is destined for the National Hockey League and being involved in trades like that. And your point is well taken. This is one time where I really want to insist we remember how old they are and what else is going on in their lives. There could be a significant other that they're very close to and don't want to leave, a school environment that they're enjoying, a billet family that they love. Take your pick, maybe moving further away from their family, their biological family's home, if they're playing near that home and there's talk about them being traded further away, that sort of thing. It definitely takes a toll. And I quite frankly think it's irresponsible.
And for this weekend, the Kitchener Rangers, they're coming here to Barrie this weekend for your one and only trip. So for the Rangers this year, another surprising start right now near the top of the Western Conference standings. Last year when we were talking, we mentioned how Ahokas, the head coach, was, really getting them buy into the systems. Is that the case again this year? Are we seeing that this Rangers team overperforming because of some great coaching?
I'm starting to think that I'm overusing overperforming. But yes would be my short answer to this. And I will extend that praise to the entire coaching staff. Jeff Kurzakis, one of the assistants, and Brad Flynn, the other. This trio works well together. I should include Jordan DeCourt, the goaltending coach and video coach, in this too. As a group, they work really well together. But it begins and ends with the head coach. There is no question that when UC Ahokas arrived, he ushered in a brand new era of Kitchener Rangers hockey because the team, I remember the game in Barrie last season was the last one that we played before Christmas. It was game number 34 for the Rangers, and they won it and went into the Christmas break at 24-8-2. Well, this year at the Christmas break, the Rangers had played 33 games instead of 34, and they won 23 of the 33. So 24 of 34 last year, 23 of 33 this year. And yes, there's a lot of talk about it's kind of been an open secret that the Kitchener Rangers would like to bid for the right to host the Memorial Cup in 2027. And when you're doing that, you expect to have a team on the ice that will be competitive enough to win that Memorial Cup. You at least have to be in the conversation. If I'm a Kitchener Rangers fan, and I hate to be a bit of a negative Nelly here, but if I'm a Kitchener Rangers fan, I would pay less attention to the Rangers have the right mix of young players. Do they have enough draft picks in the cupboard to build that team for 2027, et cetera? I would be asking myself how many more years UC Ahokas is going to be in this league because he has, in my opinion, taken it by storm from a coaching perspective.
Well, that's just it. I was going to ask about Ahokas. Like, how long is he going to be in the OHL at this level? Because you have to think he's got to be considered for Coach of the Year with just the way he's managed this team, exceeding those expectations. And really, it's a great sign that the veterans on this team also buying in, despite seeing Carson Rakoff move during the offseason.
Yeah, this is a guy where I think that he convinces the team that there's almost no such thing as a rebuild. Like, let pundits like me say, okay, a rebuilding season is coming up for the Kitchener Rangers and get ready for the rebuild. This is just a guy that coaches his team that says, if you play this way and if you put in this effort, you will be rewarded with success. And here we are having the same conversation this year than we did last year. So as far as UC Ahokas is concerned, there's no question, and he's made no bones about it, he has aspirations to be a National Hockey League coach. And if he wanted to achieve those goals, the maybe not the only way, but certainly the best way to do it was to come over from Europe and start coaching in North America. He got that opportunity with the Kitchener Rangers, but it's not a forever thing. Okay. This is not Dale Hunter 2.0. Dale owns the team, or at least partly owns it in London. That's why he's there for so long. Brian Kilray, etc.
Mhm.
Not that he was an owner, but UC Hocus is not going to be here for 30 years. Full stop. Everybody knows that. So how soon he makes the jump to the next level remains to be seen. I can tell you from getting to know him, and it's been a year and a half, a season and a half getting to know this guy. But as we get to know one another better, and I get to have more conversations with him away from the game, it is my sense, just my sense, that he's not in an incredible hurry. That's absolutely the goal, to get to the National Hockey League. And I suppose if the right team with the right offer came around at the right time, who would fault him for blinking, or who would fault him for taking it? But I don't think he's in an awful hurry. And I get the sense that he would love to see this process, the word he loves to use with the team, through to an eventual championship, or at least the chance to compete for one, if in fact the Rangers don't compete for one this year the way they're going so far. So I remain to be or I look forward to being completely wrong on that, and UC Ahokas flying the coop at the end of this season. But I get the sense that he's in it for a little bit of a longer haul.
And for the Rangers this season, we kind of touched on it, how they've had a lot of additions since that NCAA vote. And it seems as though you would think that how would that affect the chemistry? But it seems like the next guy that comes in really is helping this team move to the next level. I'm thinking as far back as when Pridham joined the team, as he's been something else to follow.
Yeah, it's a next man up philosophy here, if you'll forgive the cliche. But Pridham is a great example, Mike, because what do you know about these guys when they're coming in from the BCHL like Pridham did? You know a little bit that you hear from people covering the league. You look at his stats and they're like, okay, for a
Yeah.
third round NHLer, how are you doing? And then he comes over here to Kitchener. And as you said, he has been an absolute treat to watch, and a good young man too. A lot of fun to be around. I will say that I think winning a lot masks a whole lot of problems, and this team has been winning. So when you come into the team and you're asked to fulfill a certain role and you accept that role, and then the team wins 5 in a row, 6 in a row, 7 in a row, which they did just before Christmas. It's kind of easy to get on board. Like, okay, these guys know what they're talking about. We're in a good situation here. And it's also, I think, helped the organization move guys like Weston Cameron's an example, who is down with the Junior B Redhawks. Avery Anstis playing with the Listowel Cyclones. Caden Schneider just sent down to play with Cambridge as well in the Junior B Loop. I think it helps you move those players to different areas within the game with the idea that, look, you're going to go here, you're going to get regular minutes, and then there will be space for you on this team, this really successful team that wins a lot when the time is right.
It almost sounds as though the system like the London Knights are using with the London Nationals, where you send down your young players, get some experience at the GOJHL level, and then bring them up. So then they're learning that system that you want to play when they eventually do make it to the junior level.
You nailed it. I think that's the best example of it. And the only difference really is I think there's a much tighter relationship between the Knights and the Nationals, where with the Rangers right now, we've got the Redhawks for some, the Cyclones for others. And I don't think there's quite the same. But believe you me, I have no doubt that the conversations are happening from this Rangers coaching staff to those other organizations about how they want this player utilized and checking in on his development on a regular basis.
And as we head into this final stretch towards the playoffs, last year Kitchener kind of took a bit of a tumble in the standings with their final push towards the postseason. But this year it feels a little different, especially you already touched on it with Jackson Parsons being one of the top goaltenders in the league. Do you feel like Parsons might be that one piece that might help Kitchener stay at the top of the Western Conference standings?
Yes, yes, and yes. I mean, Jackson Parsons has been simply sensational this year. And what a great story. Like, let's not forget, this is one of those guys who had to endure COVID in this league. So you get an entire season wiped out, you get another season cut short. And then poor Jackson Parsons, and forgive me for being biased here, but he's such a great kid to be around. When he finally gets the chance to be the goaltender, what does he do about 5 or 6 games in but wreck his shoulder and he's done for the season? So this is really, in all, as an overager, this is Jackson Parsons' first full year as a starter in this league. And clearly he is enjoying that. But your point about how things went last year is not lost on me, Mike, because it's almost like you wait for the other shoe to drop. Look, this is the Kitchener Rangers organization, a very proud organization with a very strong history. 2008. 2008 was the last time this team won an OHL championship. That's an awfully long time for a franchise like this. And so you get so excited last year. You run out to a great start. You add at the trade deadline. Thank you very much, by the way, Barry, for Edward Chalet and Olivier Savard. They were great to have here for a while. But the second half didn't go certainly the way the first half did. I've asked UC Ahokas about that, and he tells me every time the same thing. He will not change his answer. That was last year. We're not even thinking about last year. We look at one game and then the next game. So yeah, it should be different this time. And Jackson Parsons is a big reason for that. You could look at the glass half empty analysis with the same thing and say, you're playing Jackson Parsons an awful lot. Like, I'm almost afraid to say it out loud, but what if, heaven forbid, the what if happens and then what? But listen, you can play the what if game all night long if you want. I think what the Kitchener Rangers have found in Jackson Parsons, who's relishing the workload, is a guy that is clearly ready to be a number one goaltender and stand up as one of the best in this league. So I do think that's one of the big reasons that there is reason for optimism in Kitchener right now.
And it's really too bad that, we don't get to see the Rangers more often than one visit a year, but I'm glad you were able to come on, and I like the timing that is right at the trade deadline. So we got to, do two birds with one stone kind of thing.
I think it's fantastic. And I am all for, like, let me say this to anybody who will listen. I am all for a rebalanced Ontario Hockey League schedule. Please, one visit to Barrie and Barrie's one visit to Kitchener is not enough. I'm here for a minimum of 3 games each season, two one way and one the other. I mean, or something. But we have to really reimagine. And as we grow in this league and it expands, maybe there's some room for that. But can't wait to see you at the Sadlin Arena.
Well, I'm sure there's going to be popcorn ready in the press box for you when you get here. But either way, it's always good to chat, and thanks for coming on.
Anytime at all, Mike. Thanks for inviting me.
So that was Mike Farwell, the radio play-by-play voice for the Kitchener Rangers and also the host of the OHL podcast. It's always great to catch up with Farwell because him and I, we go back. I remember when I started covering the Kitchener Rangers as a reporter for a small radio station, Farwell just started doing color commentary with Don Cameron. So him and I were, good friends. It's always good to touch base. And if you haven't checked out the OHL podcast, definitely worth a listen. It's also on YouTube, so you can head on over there and check out what Farwell has to offer on his channel because it's always great just to be able to talk junior hockey. It's great to have different medias and different opportunities. And yeah, I love that this was able to work out right after the OHL trade deadline. We have another crossover between From the Booth with Mike and the OHL podcast. So again, thank you very much for all your support. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Talk to you soon.